Okay, so hopefully others will join soon. So hello everyone, I'm Ashutosh and I'm an assistant professor at CSC Department IIT Kanpur, and I would like to welcome you all for the third session of SAIL. I hope everyone has been enjoying the talks so far. Before I start, just one small logistical thing. So during the session, if you have any questions for the speaker, please type your questions in the QA window and not in the chat. And we will be taking all the questions towards the end of the talk. Okay, so all right, maybe I will start now. So for this session, it's an honor to have Professor Suzan Verberne with us. So Professor Suzan Verberne is an associate professor at the Leiden Institute of Advanced Computer Science in Leiden, the Netherlands. She's the group leader of the text mining and retrieval group there. She's quite a prolific researcher. She has been involved in projects involving a large number of application domains and collaborations. From social media to law, from archaeologists to medical specialists. So she has covered a wide spectrum of research there. Currently her recent work centers around interactive information access for specific domains. She is currently supervising 4 PhD projects about legal information retrieval, 3 of which are part of European consortium on domain-specific systems for information extraction and retrieval. So today she's going to enlighten us on the topic of explainable legal information retrieval. This is a very interesting and relevant topic. Recently, even I've started looking into this topic. So without any further ado, I would like to give the stage to Professor Verberne. Please take it away. Thanks a lot. Suzan, you're muted, I guess.
Thank you. Does it look good, the screen sharing?
Yeah, it looks good, yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for the introduction and thank you for inviting me for this presentation in the symposium. So I'm not an expert in law, but I'm a computer scientist and I'm an expert in information retrieval and text mining. I do work together with legal scholars. So there's where I get my legal knowledge from. And today, so first this slide is to introduce myself, but actually, let me remove this. Actually, Ashutosh has really introduced my profile quite complete. This is my website. You can also follow me on Twitter if you are there. So I hope you're all doing well. There is a small time difference. I'm happy that I got this time slot, which is for me in the middle of the day. I know for you, it's already later in the afternoon. So I hope I can get you active a little bit. I also hope you are all doing well in terms of the COVID situation. I just got the news that I could book my vaccination for later this month. So my age group turn is right now here in the Netherlands. So I really hope for all of you that you will also, stay healthy and safe for the remainder of the pandemic. Okay, so up to the research talk. So what I would like to start with is to give some credit to my PhD students who are working in the legal domain. And as was introduced just before, I am supervising 4 PhD students who work with legal data. The first one, Gineke Wiggers, her project is already a couple of years ongoing, and some of the work that I present here comes from her project. And the other 3 are PhD projects in the European consortium called Dossier, Domain-Specific Systems for Information Extraction and Retrieval. This is the website. It's a European project with 15 PhD students across Europe. And the 3 that I'm supervising are all taking place in the legal domain, but addressing very different tasks, actually. Apart from that, I supervise, of course, also master students, and the collaboration that I had with one master student led to a workshop paper, and that paper is also part of this presentation. Okay, so here's the outline. I will first, because this symposium is about AI and law, and that's a very broad topic, right? AI covers many different tasks and problems. So I will start introducing information retrieval from a very general perspective. And then I will have a few slides about specific characteristics of legal information retrieval. So how is information retrieval in the legal domain different from information retrieval in other domains, say web search? Then I move into my main topic for today, which is about making search engines explainable to the user. And there I will present the methods and results of the project that I did with a master's student last year. And then I will conclude with saying a few words about what we are currently working on and how we want to do this for the legal domain. Okay, so here is a picture of information retrieval, of information search. There is a user, there's a search engine. The user formulates queries. They have an information need, they want to know something. Then they formulate a query to try to satisfy that need. Sometimes multiple queries are needed. But for each query, the search engine returns a ranked list of documents. And the ranking of the documents is based on how relevant the search engine thinks that the documents are. So the most relevant document is on top. Now, you probably know that the core of the relevance is also traditionally keyword matching. So you won't get any results that do not contain the terms from your query, right? You're searching for a specific topic, you're typing something in, you expect to find documents that contain those words. So the core of relevance traditionally always was keyword matching. But there are many other aspects to document relevance, and you are probably familiar with the very strong focus on popularity in web search. So the more often a document is clicked, the more often it will show up in results lists. If you are, well, say over 40, if you are like my age or older, you probably remember the rise of Wikipedia. Maybe you forgot, but Wikipedia is younger than Google. So we started to use Google in the early 2000s. And then when Wikipedia was founded, it very quickly started to be retrieved as one of the top results. And we still see that now, right? If you search for some term or person, some entity, it's almost always Wikipedia that ends up at the top of the list. So this is very clearly a view, evidence of how popularity of documents, how often something is clicked, will end up higher in the list. Of course, there was also the PageRank algorithm, which was about how many incoming hyperlinks does a document get. Right? So you are familiar with that, but it's important to mention here because if we look at specific domains like academic search, Google Scholar, or in legal search, of course, what we are talking about today, this popularity is not always as relevant as in web search, because in these specific domains, the information needs can be much more specific and can be different between different users, more different even, because every user has their own problem to solve. So in these domains, we have other indicators of relevance. And when you're doing when you're using Google Scholar, indicators of relevance, of course, the number of citations. So this is also a form of popularity, right? But that's popularity in the academic sense, number of citations, but also when was it published, where was it published? That might all play a role. And so this is, you can view relevance from the eye of the search engines, which aspects of documents are used to rank them, but you can also view it, and that's even more relevant, from the eye of the user. What does the user consider to be relevant aspects of documents? So which aspects of documents determine their relevance? So I have the the three dots here because I'll come back to the legal case. But with relevance is a very important item here in information retrieval. This also plays a role in evaluation, and this is very general, and there are many more metrics, but I want to mention it here because you all have different backgrounds. Majority of you will know these metrics, but not everyone. So what we normally do when we evaluate search engine is that we use two types of metrics. We have set metrics and we have ranking metrics. And all of them have these two core metrics that they are built upon. So if we want to know what proportion of all relevant documents in the collection to this query have been found, that is what we call the recall. So how large is the recall for this query means what proportion of all the relevant documents for this query have been found. And the other way around, we can also ask what proportion of the retrieved documents was relevant. And that's the precision. And this comes back in many different applications. Also, if you do machine learning, of course, precision and recall are very prominent in classification as well. But they stem from the IR domain, from the information retrieval domain. And because information retrieval systems return ranked lists, we often ask for things like the precision at 10, which means of the top 10, which of those, how many documents in the top 10 of the retrieved results is relevant. It's very important to realize here that we can do this, we can compute this if we know which documents are relevant for each query. And this is what we do in the field. We have these benchmark collections where relevance is just given in the test set. But in real, the relevance really depends on the user and their underlying information need. You cannot define relevance independent of a user. We do that because we need a realistic way to evaluate the search engine, but you cannot really know what the user considers to be relevant. So this is something important that I would like to mention here, that this is really an important issue in the information retrieval field, that we have the user there. We can have benchmark sets, but the user in the end defines what is relevant. Okay, so that was my general, very short introduction to information retrieval. Normally I would ask now, are there any questions? Or I would see the audience, at least I could see people nodding or frowning, but I don't see anything right now. So because no one has their camera on, I think. No. So I just hope it was clear, and maybe you can ask your questions later. Okay, so let's move to the legal field. So if we look at, there are different viewpoints to legal information retrieval. We can think about legal documents, what are correct characteristics of those. I will list them soon. We can also ask what is relevant and specific about legal users, and I will also show that. So first of all, if we look at legal information retrieval, then the collections that we have, the documents in there have an extreme variety in length. So we collaborate with a legal search engine in the Netherlands of a large publisher. And what we have in that retrieval collection is, on the extremes, we have a government report that is 161 pages versus a newspaper item that's only 57 words. All right, so this is really extreme. Secondly, we have both structures and unstructured data. So the structured data would be case law, for example, but blog posts are really unstructured. And the scope of the collection is, of course, smaller than for web search because everything is legal documents. But there's still quite a large variety. And also very importantly, and this is how legal information retrieval relates also to academic information retrieval, and that's the large amount of references in legal documents. And this is one specific topic that Gineke, my PhD student, studied. And if you're interested, you could have a look at that. Okay, the I can answer this question now by Saranj about perspective on using F1 scores for IR tasks versus using recall and precision separately. This is also very relevant in classification tasks. And when we're looking at information retrieval and we want to use these set metrics, we always do that like up to a certain ranking level. So it will be 10 or 20. And then you could use F1, but you always should show also recall and precision. So F1 could be a metric that you can use, for example, for comparing systems or optimizing systems. But in the end, if you want to give some information, then if you want to give some information on how to compare the systems, you need to show both precision and recall. And that holds also for classification tasks. Okay, so this is about legal documents. Then one other thing that we studied in a user study is what are the factors of documents that constitute relevance for legal professionals and for legal scholars. And we came up with a number of different characteristics. And here you title relevance, this just means is the does the word from the query or do the terms from the query occur in the title, yes or no? Or if we weigh them, how relevant is this title in terms of the term overlap with the query? Document type, I just mentioned the large variety of document types. This is definitely a reason why a legal professional would open or would not open a certain document. Recency, what's the date of publishing? For some information needs, we want the oldest document. For some information needs, we want the most recent documents. And then there are these specific legal aspects like the level of depth, the legal hierarchy, the law area. You want, if you are looking in a specific area, you want to find documents from that area. Authority, that comes along with credibility. So who wrote it, the source, where was it published? And then there are these things like the bibliographical references that can give relevance, usability, but also whether the document was annotated, how long it is, etc. So there was a whole collection of different relevance factors that users came up with when we asked them, okay, you picked this document, why is it relevant to you? And these are the most important ones. So that is interesting. And this also relates, and I will come back to that later, is how can we better explain to the user why a document is considered relevant? Okay, so I just said we can look at documents and characteristics, but we can also look at user characteristics in the legal domain. So one thing that was found in the literature, actually, I should have put a reference here because we do have a reference for that, is that traditionally from my field, from information retrieval, legal search is referred to as an example of a high recall task. This means legal professionals cannot afford to miss information that could be relevant in court. So they want to retrieve everything that is relevant. Recall must be almost 100%. But what we see in practice, and this also is found in other studies, is that in the legal practice, very often searchers are actually looking for a precision at high ranks because they're not always doing these full recall tasks. Sometimes they just want to do a quick lookup or even a known item search, right? I'm looking for this specific document of which I know it is there. You recognize this when you're searching your inbox, right? Your email inbox. You know you have this email from this person about this and this, and you want to find that. And that's known item search. And this is actually very common in the legal domain. So this is not a high recall task. There's definitely also the aspect of precision at high ranks. We want to have in the top 3 or so the relevant document. So that is one important aspect about recall versus precision. But there are 2 other aspects, and that the third one is really relevant in the research that we do, because if you want to ask users how satisfied they are with results, or how satisfied they are with the system, or what are relevant documents. You want to ask them to explicitly mark, for example, all relevant documents to a query. This is what we call explicit feedback. That's difficult because legal professionals are really expensive. So in one small study, we first did a pilot where we tried to find out how much time we could get from legal professionals, from the users of our IR system. And the answer was 12 minutes. So if we want to do a user study and get user input or user feedback, we can only ask 12 minutes of their time. Sorry. So that is a relevant aspect to take into account. So we typically want to work with implicit feedback. So can we learn from the interaction of the user with the search engine, whether they are satisfied? And then there is this last aspect, and that is the need for control. So this is the case for many professional tasks, professional users. They want to be sure that what they think they get from the search engine is indeed what they get, what they see. So they really want to be in control of the search system. And that is why in some professional tasks, Boolean search is still being used. If you look at, for example, systematic reviewing, the medical domain, or patent search, like by patent professionals, they use complex Boolean queries where they say, okay, the relevant documents should contain these words, but not these words, or these words in combination with these words, and these things can be really long. And that is complex, but they want to do that because by doing so, they can explicitly control what they get and what they don't get. So now we get to this. I get to the second part of this talk, which is about explainable information retrieval. So I just said that professional users have the need to be in control of the search process. And in these professional domains, trust in the system is even more important than in generic web search, because your job and the quality of your work depends on it, right? So you really have to trust the system that it's giving you the relevant information. So what helps is in order to give control to the user, is to make the search process transparent and explainable. It means we want to explain to the user why the document that they are receiving are relevant. And if we want to do at some point personalization of results, because every user is different and there's all these very specific information needs, if we want to personalize the results, we even want to make sure more that what we are doing is transparent, because professional users don't like black boxes where magic is happening, right? So they want to be sure. I want to be sure if I tell my students, okay, search for this and this query in Google Scholar, and then you will get the second result, and that will be your relevant paper. If I do that, but it's personalized, then my student gets a different result. And you want to be sure that that what you expect to get, that is what you get. So you want to explain to the user how the results are personalized. Okay, so because it's difficult for users sometimes to understand why the retrieved documents are relevant to their query, and this is mainly a problem if the models are more complex, so they go from this term-based matching, right? The more often your query term occurs in a document, the more relevant it is. This is pretty explainable. But when we go to neural models, deep neural network models, they are much less explainable because the connection between the query and the document is implicit. And this morning, for you, a couple of hours ago, there was a question from the audience about the use of embedding. So which embeddings did you use? And then that presenter said, no, we didn't do any embeddings, but in information retrieval, we do use embedding. So we embed both the query and the document in a dense vector space, and then they are matched to each other. So that is a form of non-literal content matching, and that's difficult to explain. So if we want to do explainable search, we need to make sure that we can explain to the user how the model works to some extent, to indicate to the user why the results are retrieved. And so this connects to previous work on explainable recommendation and search. This is a nice tutorial. The slides are also somewhere online. And that's quite an extensive field, but it's actually it has much more attention to recommendation than to search. So recommendation is what we all know from the entertainment context, but also from the online shopping context. We get suggestions about what we want to watch, what we want to listen, what we want to buy, based on what we previously bought or listened or watched. And this is often explained with a text such as, users who had similar ratings with you highly rated this item, or you have highly rated items that are similar to this item. Or, and this is in Dutch, but what it's saying is that you probably want to watch this series because it was the number 8 in the Netherlands today. So people around you are also watching this is sort of what is in here. So this is a form of explanation to the user why we get these recommendations. Okay, so let me quickly answer one question in the chat, of which it was said that it should be typed in the Q&A, but how can we connect legal search with web search? I can answer that in different ways, but the short answer is that legal search is a form of web search because it also takes place online. But differences are, for example, that not all documents in the legal collections are actually open to everyone. So each user gets different results based on their subscriptions, for example, to databases. And also it's of course limited to only those things that are relevant to the legal domain. But if we consider web search to be general domain, like open domain search, then it's something different because legal search is a domain specific type of search. So that's the answer. Okay, so as I said, there has been more attention on recommendation than on search, and our focus is on the explainability of search engines instead of recommendation engines. And there, now I'm going to present the work that we did for this paper that was worked by a master student, Johannes Giels, last year. Okay, so here, what I should say is that we first start this with general web search. So our goal is to do this for the professional domains, specifically the legal domain. But we first wanted to show this on like known benchmark sets and experiment how it works there, and then later make the move to professional search. Also, we're not doing any personalization right now, so it's all generic, where we assume that the relevance assessments are the same irrespective of the user. So let me first show you here that if you think about explainability, it can be very complex, but in a way, we are already used to some form of explainability. And that is the use of search snippets on the result page. We all know this from search engines that we type in a query, we get results, and we see that the, so by the way, use Wikipedia again, but that the terms for my query are actually highlighted in the snippet in boldface. So this allows us as user to see where the relevant information is and why these documents are considered to be relevant. Right, so this is already a form of explanation, and there is some prior work about investigating how users actually use this information in judging the relevance of documents. So that's a good start. And we move on from that to by addressing explainability to two aspects. So we're talking here about showing to the user why the results that they see are relevant. And we're adding two things. One is to show for the user query what the importance of each query term was in ranking the documents. So how were the query terms weighted among each other to determine the relevance of the documents. And for the documents, we show the most relevant passage for each document, because this would help the user. It's the idea, our idea was this helps the user to see if indeed this relevant information is in the document and to know where they have to find it in the document, where they can find it. Well, because of the broadness of this symposium, I'm not going into the details of the neural IR model, but I do reference it. So we built on the common, it's a bit older, 5 years old, it's quite old, DRMM. That's the deep relevance matching model for ad hoc retrieval. It's quite common and it's still also commonly used, although recently it's being superseded by the transformer-based models, as you can imagine. Right, so this is a neural model that's often used. So the idea is that we explain to the user which query terms are the most relevant for the ranking and which passages are the most relevant in each document. And we show that on the result page, and that would look something like this. So here's an example. I will show it a bit larger later, but this will be, here's the query box for radio waves and brain cancer. And then here there is a, I was going to say pie chart, but I think it's called donut chart. Oh yeah, here it is. It's a donut chart with the relevance of each query term. So the green one, for example, here is and, so that's not so relevant. And this is based on how frequent each of these terms is in the relevant and the non-relevant documents. And so which of these terms was the most informative for determining the relevance of the documents. That's how this was done. And then here's the ranked results. So this is as you know it, right, with the bold facing for the query terms. And then, but then on the side of the snippet is this thumbnail that is showing the whole document and then marked in green where the most relevant passage is according to our model. Right, so two visual additions to a traditional result page. That is the idea that we had. So the questions that we asked are, how do users judge the explainability and accessibility of this explainable result page compared to regular result page? And how well can they select relevant documents based on this result page? So does it make the relevance assessment easier? So here were the methods from a bird's eye point of view. So as I said, we don't do any legal search yet. We use a general domain track collection called Robust04. We indexed it with Anserini. And then in the first retrieval step, we retrieved the top 1,000 documents with a lexical ranking model called BM25. That you can forget that, but you have to know that's a model that is based on the term overlap. It's very efficient and you can use it to retrieve an initial set that you then re-rank based on the relevance assessments in the data. And this is a neural model. It's called the deep relevance matching model. I just introduced it. And that's heavier than the initial retriever BM25. And so we only do that on the top 1,000 documents instead of on the whole collection. And that is a supervised learning task. So it uses the relevance assessments in the collection. The collection has queries. For each query, a set of documents with marks by people saying this is relevant, this is not relevant, this is relevant, this is not relevant. So this ranker is learned on data, the training data here. So what we did for these two aspects of explainability, we got the query term weights from the term weighting function of the RMM, and we visualized them in a donut chart like this. So here is Nobel Prize winner. So the weights that these get, these are all quite evenly distributed. They are based on what DRMM learns about the relevance of the documents based on this query. And secondly, in order to get the most relevant passage, what we do is we split the document in passages of 100 tokens. These were unstructured documents. If you would, for example, have case law, then you could have structured paragraph instead of passages of 100 tokens. Then we retrain the neural re-ranking model on the passage level, and we get a score for each passage. And then we use the maximum scoring passage for each document to rank the documents. This is based on this paper from 2019. All right, so what we get then in the visualization is a highlighting of the most relevant passage according to, again, the DRMM. So this is the passage from all the 100 words passages. This is the passage that scores the highest in relevance according to the DRMM. And that is shown. And that's also what is shown in the snippet. As you see here, this is not so nice about this collection. It's not structured at all. So you would, if you, for example, have case law or Wikipedia, you would see nicely structured documents with subheadings and, I don't know, tables, etc. And that's not the case here. So that makes it a little, well, less informative, I would say. Okay, so first, so what we did is a user study, and I will show the results of that. I think that's the most interesting, but I first wanted to, because otherwise you will probably ask, so how well is this doing, the ranking itself? And here are two metrics that I didn't introduce because it's a bit more complex to introduce. One is the mean average precision and one is the NDCG. And those are both based on the quality of the ranking, positions of ranked documents. And P at 20 means precision at 20. So this means what proportion of the documents in the top 20 are relevant. All right, so that would be around 30% here. And as you can see, if you rank the documents based on the maximally scoring paragraph, the precision and the NDCG are a little bit lower than in the normal DRMM on the whole document. In terms of mean average precision, it's a bit higher. So this shows that it is different. It's not really better or much worse. It depends on the metric, but it's doing okay. All right, so that was just a sanity check to see whether we didn't throw away any quality by doing the paragraph selection. Okay, now about the user evaluation. What did we do? We created the two interfaces, the normal search result page and the explainable search result page. And then we had volunteers and they got the results for 6 queries. Half of them got the first 3 queries in interface 1 and the other 3 queries in interface 2, and the other group had it vice versa. And then it was interleaved. So they got 1 query in interface 1, 1 in interface 2, 1 in 1, 1 in 2, and so on. Yeah, and okay, so for each, this is important, for each query, the top 5 documents were shown and the ranking algorithm is exactly the same. So only the visualization is different. So this would be the traditional interface, regular R, and this is the explainable interface that I showed before. So what you see here is the results are exactly the same and the snippets are also exactly the same, and they both have the bold facing in the snippets as we are all used to. Or this is exactly the same. Then we selected 6 queries and we selected them based on a couple of criteria. First, they needed to have a title in the data sets. The documents needed to have titles in the data set. There needed to be relevant documents in the top 5 because otherwise it's difficult to measure whether people select relevant documents or not. So document A is the first document, document B is the second document, etc. So most of them have only 1 relevant document in the top 5. And the query needed to be at least 3 words long because otherwise it's not so nice to show the donut chart. Right, so these 6 queries were used for the user study. And then what we did is we showed the user the result page, either the regular or the explainable one. And then they had to answer these two questions. Is first of all, by looking at the result page, I can understand why the search engine returned these results for the shown query. So that's the explainability. But we also asked for accessibility. How easy is it to tell the relevance of the results? So by looking at the result page, I can tell which queries are useful without opening the links. And these two items for evaluation were based on this paper by me and Zhang, which was purely only about snippets. So we changed it a bit to be about the whole result page because this work was about snippets only. But we did one other thing, and that is we also asked him, okay, now you see these 5 documents. Can you indicate which ones are relevant to the query? And we know the relevance because it's in the collection, right? It's in the test collection and in the robust 04. But we asked them, can you mark the relevant documents? And so we can measure how well they are doing in selecting the relevant documents. Okay, so let me look at the time. Can you give me a mark, Ashutosh, when I'm like almost...
Yeah, so I think we have 5-6 minutes more.
Okay, good, yeah. So here are the overall results. So what you see here is the dispersion of the accessibility and the explainability score. So here's explainability, here's accessibility. And so N is 66 because we have 22 participants and they see 3 of the queries in either interface. So that's 3 times 22 is 66. And what you see here is that the explainable interface really scores higher on average, but also including the standard deviation compared to the regular interface. Right, so this is a really clear difference, although there are, of course, outliers. So that's first of all, and actually this difference is significant. So if we do a Wilcoxon signed rank test between the users, so we have an average score for each user and we pair them, and it's only 22, so that's actually a very small sample size, we get a very significant difference for both explainability and accessibility. But we did some more statistical analysis, doing a 3-way ANOVA, investigating the relationship between the score that people give, so that would be between 1 and 5, how explainable do you think it is? So that's the dependent variable. And then as independent variables, we had what interface was it shown in? Who was it? Because there could be differences between the individual participants. And what was the query? And what we see is that the explainability scores, they are dependent on the interface and the individual participant and the query. The accessibility scores are also significantly different between the interfaces and between the participants, but not between the queries. But what we see in both cases is that the interface is by far the most significant factor. So there is a small individual difference going on between users, but whether it was explainable or regular, that was by far the largest effect. And this is shown here as well. This is the per query analysis. So what this is if you look at this graph, this is the explainability score that people on average give to a query in one of the 2 interfaces. So for example, if you look here at this yellow one, the yellow query got on average a 3.5 score for explainability in the regular interface, but it got a 4.5 score on average in the explainable interface. Right, so remember, those are not the same users. So half of the users saw this query in the regular interface, the other half saw it in the explainable interface. What you see here is that there was one query that actually has a decrease here. So yeah, that's uncommon, and I don't know why that was happening. But you see that there is a difference between the queries, and here you see the same pattern for all the queries. Accessibility was higher for all queries. So this was quite convincing. But there is one caveat here, and that is that the data set was small, of course, the sample here. And we investigated whether people would be better in selecting the relevance documents in the explainable interface. And as you see here, the precision and the recall are higher, 59%, 75%. So it's both higher than in the regular interface, but these results are not significant. And that is because the sample size is small and the standard deviation is really large. So if you look at here, I mean, although it goes from 53 to 59 with a standard deviation of 0.4, we cannot claim that that is significant. So it's not significant. So we cannot say that people are actually better in selecting the relevant documents. But the good news is they did judge the proposed interface to be significantly more explainable and easier to assess, to judge the relevant documents than the regular search engine result page. However, we could not prove that they were actually better in selecting the relevant documents. So we need a larger data set to be able to prove that. All right, so those were the conclusions from that study. And what are we doing now? We move to the legal domain. So we want to know, in the beginning, I presented these relevance factors for legal IR. And our question now is, which of those can we deduce from documents? And how then can we implement those factors in an existing method for legal document ranking? So that is not about explainability, but improving the ranking with other factors than just the word matching. But then we want to make some, so how can we explain the relevance factors in the user interface? And the company we are working with, the legal information retrieval engine, they are already experimenting a bit with showing relevance or explaining relevance factors in the interface to some extent, like things like when recency played a role, they show that explicitly. And this is in particular the project by my PhD student Ariane, who is part of the dossier project. Okay, this brings me to the end of my talk. This is the webpage of my research group if you're interested, or you can follow me on Twitter. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Very interesting talk. So yeah,
shall I unshare my screen?
Yeah, I mean, you can stop sharing. I mean, if you.
Yeah, it's maybe, yeah, it's nice if I could see some people, but I actually don't.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. I mean, maybe because of the bandwidth, they may not have switched on their videos, I guess. Yeah, so.
Shall I? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe I think we can move to the questions session. And I think few questions you already answered. So there are a few questions which are not answered. So there's one from Rajeshwari. So she's asking something from your initial part of the talk about the level of depth as a characteristic for retrieval system, right? So her question is that this is also kind of user specific, right? So how do you incorporate this user characteristic in defining the level of depth?
We don't. So it is, so what we want to do is being able to show these characteristics more clearly to the user so that the user can decide whether or not the document is relevant. So give more information about the document. And it could be that some of these relevance factors can also be part of the ranking model, but I think level of depth would more be something to show next to the document to give just information to the user. And in the end, the user decides whether that's a reason to select the document. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so the next question is about the embedding methods that are you using in your research? I mean, are there any publicly available data sets that you are using?
Yeah, so embedding, so I was saying we build in this work on the DRMM, that is the deep relevance matching model. And you can attach different embedding models to that. You can use Word2Vec or GloVe, but it's all like, well, we're almost saying like traditional embedding methods, like a couple of years old. But currently we're also experimenting with transformer-based models. And one thing that's interesting to mention there, maybe so this audience is mixed, but I'm pretty sure quite some of you have heard of BERT models, transformer-based models, language models. They actually have by default a limited input size of 512 tokens. So if you want to be able to embed legal documents, then you need to either split them in paragraphs or use some kind of long form or long transformer Excel model. So what we are doing right now in the work of Sophia Althammer, I mentioned her in one of my first slides, is we use a dense passage retrieval model. And that is indeed like embedding passages and relating them to queries. And then there is a second part of the question about publicly available data sets. Well, yeah, for the legal domain, we mainly work with case law as evaluation sets, because those are like available. There's one case law data set from University of Queensland. And there's the Collie, what's it? The Collie workshop yearly. They have a collection as well. Yeah, and by the way, there is a legal BERT model already, not made by us, but it is available. Yeah.
Yeah, but these case laws are also kind of country specific, right? Like, I mean, it changes from, I mean, different countries have different kind of legislation, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the challenges. And the very first project that I mentioned from Gineke Wiggers, she is explicitly working in the Dutch context. Mm-hmm. So that means that, so we don't have a case law system in the Netherlands. And that's different from like the Collie is Canadian case law, for example. Indeed, that's a challenge. Yeah.
Okay, so then there is one question regarding why did you specifically use DRMM for re-ranking? I mean, why not some other re-ranking method?
Yeah, so the reasons are that we wanted to use a neural model because since in the past 5 years, all the re-rankers are neural models, and those are in particularly relevant to make explainable because they are not explainable by themselves. Mm-hmm. And the other reason is that when we started this, that was still the most used neural re-ranker. And well, now there is more re-ranking being done by, for example, the dense passage retrieval or BERT type models. Mm. So that was the reason.
Okay, thanks. So then there is this question, what are your thoughts on understanding the user's tasks, especially in law, which is mostly doctrinal research in search of arguments that work? I mean, how could that context be included in search?
I don't know what doctrinal means.
Even I'm also not clear about that term.
Well, so that's not my expertise. If we think about argument mining, but I know that we are slightly using that in the sense of investigating entailment between paragraphs. Oh,
you get systematic nature. Yeah, systematic, not empirical. Okay.
Yeah, well, that is a very good question. Yes, so I can say different. Yeah, laws, normative system. I see what you mean. Yeah, so my idea, but that is an opinion, is that AI should be there to support users and not replace them. And I think that search is one of the ways to do that, because you leave the query forming and the selection of the information to the user, and you leave the indexing and large scale analysis to the computer. So I think that search, like information retrieval using queries, is a good way to support the user. But that could definitely be expanded with things like entailment and like specific paragraph mining, argument mining. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I don't think we could have automatic systems be as normative as users. Yeah. But I hope I'm formulating it well, because again, I'm not at all a legal expert.
Yeah. And so then there is one question: how do you calculate the precision from a very large corpus? I mean, recalls, I mean, you can do that, but what about precision? I mean,
Well, it's actually the other way around. So maybe that's the Rinkage was confused there, but yeah, it's true that. So if you look at the top 10, you can quite easily select which ones are relevant, and you can calculate precision, just how many of these top 10 documents are relevant. So that's precision, that's fairly doable. Recall is much more difficult because you don't know how many of the documents in total were relevant. Yeah, so what we actually do is we look at, so if we have a test collection, it's simply assumed that if humans judged the top 100 or 200 documents for some baseline ranker, that covers most of the relevant documents. And then it's incomplete because you might retrieve documents that have not been judged, but that's still used to get an idea of recall. And the other thing that we do is we use only top 10 or top 20 and then ranking metrics. So we only take into account the documents of which we know the relevance, and then see if that documents are ranked higher than the ones of which we don't know the relevance. Oh, sorry, for which we know that they are irrelevant. Yeah.
All right. So then Ivan has a question. So different users have different queries, right? And there are different types of queries. So can that information be made use of? For example, you might have what entity and maybe how questions basically, right? So can that information be made use of in the legal context?
Sorry, I cannot find this question.
So this is Ivan.
Ivan, oh yeah, I'm wondering if you saw it treat differently various types of queries. Yeah, oh yeah, very relevant. Yeah, so there indeed, yes, we do, in the sense that, okay, so it really depends on, if you are purely looking at case law, then it's just predefined that there is a document with a new case and you have to find the relevant previous documents. So there's not so much a user query, but if you look at information retrieval in the broad sense, then indeed we distinguish between queries that are a known item search, just navigational queries, finding a known web page, or informative informational needs where people really gather information. But we don't, so I've done quite some work on that, on distinguishing the information need of queries, and also, for example, automatically finding out whether a query implicitly is a how-to question, for example. But we haven't really applied it yet in the legal context. So we do research on different types of queries, but we don't have an automatic classifier in the search engine, for example.
I see. Okay, I guess we are also kind of now short of time. So I would kind of thank you once again for a wonderful talk.
Okay, thank you.